All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name is Kevin.
And I'm John.
And we are The Real Movie Guys. On today's episode, we'll be reviewing 1917, a war movie. It takes place on April 6, 1917. Two young British soldiers are tasked with delivering a message to a friendly regiment who are going to walk into a trap and be killed unless they can deliver the stop orders in time. This story is their journey. As always, I'd like to add there will be spoilers in this review, so if that's something you would like to avoid, we do recommend pausing the video, checking out the movie, coming back to hang with us after, or if you don't care, we're glad to have you here. So, John.
Yes.
Did you know anything about this movie, as I always ask you going into this? Did you know anything? Did you know about this movie when it first initially came out?
I knew that it was a war movie.
Oh, you knew it was
that was all I knew.
Good. Okay, so you knew it was a war movie. We're starting off good.
So going into it, I expected a war movie.
Okay. So, that being said, what are your initial impressions of the movie?
Boring.
Boring.
Slow. Dramatizing.
Oh.
It was like Dramamine.
Ouch.
I couldn't get into it.
Couldn't get into it. Okay.
I tried.
Right.
I thought it was going to be another crazy Nazi movie, and it turned out to just be very boring to me.
So let's talk about it. So this movie's unique, as you know. It's shot entirely as a one long take, or it simulates one long take, which is something that most recent movie, a few years ago, that movie Birdman undertook, where it did a whole continuous shot. So this whole movie is from the perspective essentially of us walking with the soldiers, the two main characters, us walking with them and experiencing everything they're experiencing in one long shot. It goes from day to night. We do see that. Again, that's how the movie essentially is shot at this point. So, John, what did you think about the cinematography, about the film style of this movie? Before we even get into any of the other stuff, what did you think about the way it was shot?
I thought the shooting was good in most places.
Right.
But one thing I found problem with, I thought the shooting of almost everything was pretty good.
Right.
I did not like when they were shooting at night, though.
Okay.
I felt everything was way too... I mean, I understand it's nighttime and it's dark, but it felt too dark in some ways.
Right. Well, I could see you saying that, and the reason why is because it's using natural lighting. So it is dark. So everything that is dark obviously is going to appear dark, except for what's actually emitting from light sources. Not to say that they don't touch it up a smidge here and there just so you can see a little more, but overall I think they do utilize natural lighting, which was again another movie we saw previously, The Revenant, where they did that as well, where everything's natural lighting. So they try not to employ any kind of artificial means of lighting the movie. So my take on the cinematography, I personally feel this is one of the best shot movies I've ever seen. I have to say, from beginning to end. The continuous one shot, it creates such an atmosphere for this movie where instead of just seeing these characters bond, you bond with the characters as they go on this journey. From the very second that they crawl out from sleeping and they get their orders and they have to go through this whole long journey in order to, deliver the plans, you see everything. You're with them. You're not following them. You're with them. The shots zoom in close when something needs to be seen. You see it from their perspective. As someone who's standing right there, and I think that's absolutely beautiful. The way the camera just flows naturally, it's perfect. I think the cinematography is absolutely perfect in this movie, hands down. Yeah,
I agree.
It's perfect. I would say it's perfect cinematography. If you want to see how you can shoot a movie in this style, this is perfect. Absolutely perfect. That being said, go ahead. Right.
It also gives you a closer look, with the characters too.
Right.
Which I think is one of the downfalls of it too.
Right. Well,
I also feel like
so the performances then. So as far as the performances, I would say in my opinion, the performances are excellent. You have pretty much essentially the movie revolves around two main characters. You have Dean Charles Chapman, who plays Lance Corporal Blake, and then you have George McKay, who plays Lance Corporal Schofield. Blake dies about I want to say about shy of an hour, and he dies, and then Schofield's the main character for the rest of the movie, subverting expectations. We'll talk about that later, but I think they carried the movie. I thought they were normal, average people, which is what they were trying to convey, trying to cover this crazy, crazy mission of traveling an entire battlefield. I thought they were relatable. I thought their chemistry was great together, as far as two actors. I really felt the sense of camaraderie between the two, the friendship. It didn't feel artificial, which you do get that a lot of the times. But in this instance, I didn't feel that.
See, I felt the complete opposite too. I felt that their friendship seemed really fake, and the fact I felt that they were boring. Their
Okay.
characters were boring. It seemed like they kind of took two people that who maybe would have got who got maybe drafted into the war
Right.
or drafted into like this battle,
Mm-hmm.
and that they didn't want to be there, and their only main mission for the one guy was trying to get to his brother. And I felt like they didn't show them doing much battling or fighting or anything. It was more them walking and trying to become together, and I just felt like they were so far apart. They like you can almost see it at the
Mm-hmm.
end when the one guy finally meets his brother,
Right.
and he kind of is like, "Wait, you didn't like save my brother or do anything like?" And the guy's like, "Well, no, he kind of just died." And you can kind of see it was like kind of like thrown in there, but like seemed really weird in a
See,
way.
I'm not getting that from this movie. The camaraderie's there up until they die, and then at the end, you do have Schofield does meet Blake's brother, who is also in the war as well as I believe he's a higher officer, I believe. He gives him his
I think he's a
brother's
lieutenant.
lieutenant. Yeah, he gives him his things, and you could, how did he go? And it's a natural thing in war, and the fact that they're showing average guys doing something extraordinary, I think is really interesting. They're not Supermen, they're not invincible, which there are some things we'll talk about later, but overall, I think that's the appeal, and the sense of no one wants to be in war. And this movie doesn't try to drive home a political message, which I do appreciate. It really doesn't. It doesn't try to side one way or another. It just says, these men were given a task. They're not extraordinary. They're not special, but they have to complete it, and it's just their journey going through it, and you sense everything. Again, I think it's just really powerful. The whole thing, the whole journey is really powerful. Not even to say, I want to move into the setting. So the setting and the set pieces alone, I think, could each be their own character. You have the beautiful, you have the luscious, landscape. You have the farm where they go to, the city, the burning city where everything's going on. You can't see anything; everything's obscure. Each of the settings themselves, I feel, are their own character almost. They're a supporting character in this movie. How do you feel about the settings? What did you think about the placement of things?
I thought the settings were cool. I thought they were interesting.
Right,
Um, I felt like the city was awesome. It looked cool. It looked realistic,
right,
and everything looked really good.
right, right.
Um, the only thing was with the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed like some parts they followed it too long in the trenches in a way.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. I can see where you're saying that. I can understand. I think they're trying to go for the realism of how long the trenches were and what was going on. But even more so than that, I think it was about showing what's going on around the two main characters. Because if you look at them, I mean, yeah, what they're saying isn't really that interesting. It's more about what's going on around them. You have injured people. You have people arguing, just talking, hanging out. You're seeing, again, the setting's becoming a character expressing itself to you, showing you all these different happenings in order to convey the bleakness of the situation, which I think is really powerful. I mean, even the city has practically no one except for a few soldiers, and all those encounters are tense and just really they're darkly lit, and you have like the flicker of the fire in the background, and again,
Well,
just really intense. But it's a character in and of itself. It's not really, again, what could be considered boring, I think, is more establishing the levity of the situation.
well, like even when like you're saying with the people that are getting injured and hurt, and like some people are sleeping, and people seem like they're getting ready to go off and like go fight and stuff. It just seems like these two characters are just kind of almost like not even part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're their own two like people in their group, you know?
Which they
Like they
are.
don't really have a spot to be in. They're
Well, they
kind of just
do.
thrown in there.
They do, but they're not involved in what's happening around them until, the scene calls for it. So, with that being said, I think one of the other positives is the story is very simple. It's not overly complicated. I mean, you don't really need to be a history buff. You don't need to be, knowledgeable of war tactics and everything that went on. I like the simplicity of the story where two guys are given a message they have to deliver. That's the story. I mean, there's not really anything beyond that needs to be described. I mean, there's other things that happen, of course, but the simplicity of the stories is one of its strongest things. It's an easy to follow narrative that focuses more on the characters than what's actually the storyline, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I understand.
Right.
That's where maybe like I can see it from like a different point of view then,
Right.
because like I've watched so many history movies
Right.
and watched like things like that where this movie kind of seems like more of like a bland version of that maybe,
I can see what you're
or
saying.
a different version I guess,
Right.
that maybe is like not more my forte maybe.
I could see that. So, the last thing I really want to point out was, particularly the death scene in this movie. I felt was one of the most powerful death scenes I've seen in a movie. I'll break it down a little bit for you. So they're on a farm while they're on their journey. They come across a farm and a plane crashes. They end up saving the pilot from a burning wreckage, and McKay, or not McKay, I'm sorry, Blake gets stabbed and dies. And the whole sequence of events is Schofield drags Blake, away from the plane. Again, all in one continuous shot, which I think is really interesting. You see literally his face turn white, like in front of you. You see it happen, and you see it's not like an overly dramatic death. It's just harsh and ugly, and just the impact, like telling him he doesn't want to die, and to carry on with the mission, and just it's not overly dramatic. It's just ugly. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what this movie is just trying to go for, how ugly the war is. And you still have to keep moving, which is one of the pacing things of this movie is no matter what happens, you have to keep moving, which I think is really, I think that's kind of powerful in a way, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
Really powerful.
The death scene was it was decent. I thought it was well done. It was just one of those. I felt like they did it in a good way to make you kind of care about the character more than
I just don't see
you
anything
did before.
comparable. I just felt it was so realistic. It was a very realistic death, I would say, and it was almost haunting in an odd way, just seeing like his face turn. But again, only because it's in a continuous shot, I think it's so powerful because of the fact you see him die in view. Like you see someone
Yeah,
like how they would not like boom, there's an explosion, you see a body fly, and then oh, they're dead, and there you see the body. You see someone suffer and die, and I think that was
yeah,
crazy. I just think that's wow, that's intense to me. I can't
yeah.
I can't find anything comparable to that. In the comments, please let us know below if you do see a death scene that's comparable, as morbid as that is. But I couldn't find anything comparable to that, so I thought that was great. I will come up onto a couple negatives. So, John, you might agree with some of these more, maybe. My issue with the movie, I do love how it's one shot, and again, I praised it ridiculously early on in this video. There is one thing I can see bothering some people, which I don't know, maybe this relates to you. It felt like the movie was on rails. And when I say on rails, it almost feels like a video game or a theme park ride, to where, okay, we're at this one set piece, now we're at the next one. Okay, we're done here. Now we gotta do the next one. Okay, we're done in this area. Now we're gonna go to the next one. On my second viewing, I think I noticed this a lot more, to where I just felt like I was jumping from just one scene to the next scene.
Yeah, I could see that.
I could see, and that can bother me. I could see that was starting to annoy me a little bit with the pacing. Again, it didn't detract. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it was noticeable. I think more so, especially someone who's more familiar in like video games, and just seeing like, okay, it's like playing like a Call of Duty game. Like, okay, we finished over here. I finished this. Finished the farmhouse. Let's go to the city now. I finished the
Yeah.
city. I got to get to the trench area now. Like, I felt like that. I
Or
felt
some
like
of those,
next mission to mission. I felt like I was loading into the next mission at times.
yeah, like some of the scenes seem like a loading screen almost in a way.
Yeah, right. And I think that's kind of funny, and it's hard because it is one continuous shot. As much as I can praise it, I could see that that's where a lot of the transitions I think happen. Whenever you saw something like blur out of focus, or maybe like a rock, like something shifted in front of the camera, that's where they made their cuts. They're like invisible cuts. Or when he gets knocked, famously, when they do the whole transition from day to night, he gets knocked out completely. Because they're like, oh, we got to figure out how to make this night. Let's just knock him out completely, and when he wakes up, it'll be night. Uh, I forgive him for that, but like I said, a little on the rails, I would say. I don't think it detracts from the movie, but I do think it's noticeable, and it's something I did want to point out. Uh, in line with that, this movie also is heavy on what I like to call movie miracles. Movie miracles being last minute saves out of nowhere, or just so happens coincidence happens. It just so happens, that plane crashed while they were walking. Just so happened that those trenches happened to be all triggered and trapped. Again, it's silly, and it's a nitpick. I wouldn't say it's a negative. I would say it's a nitpick. I mean, you're just picking things out. Yeah, like I said, I would call it more of a nitpick. I wouldn't let it deter you from watching this movie, but it is there, so keep that in mind. History buffs always like to be, well, this isn't factual to how it happened. Well, you're right. I mean, it's a movie. We got to entertain the people to an extent, so not everything's going to be 100% factual. It is a movie. Let me reiterate that. It is a movie. So with that being said, like I said, there are some things that, not that they don't make sense, but you're like, okay, well, whatever. This is you're watching a movie instead of a historical documentary.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll touch on is there's a lot of guest stars in this movie. I don't know if you noticed that. All the guest
No, not really.
stars, they're all famous UK actors, which is interesting. You had Colin Firth, Benedict Cumberbatch, the guy I can't remember
Oh, yeah,
his,
I did remember Benedict Cumberbatch.
what's his name? I can't remember now. Yeah, Colin Firth, like I said. Again, a who's who of a lot of UK actors, and to me that took me out a little bit, because I'm like, they're all playing generals, ironically, and that took me out just like a smidgen. I'm like, oh, so that's what you're in this movie for. You're just a name, to play an act. Oh, the guy from Sherlock, he played Moriarty. Sorry, can't remember his name. People are gonna murder me in the comments. Is what it is. I can't remember his name. Yeah, seriously. Again, like I said, it took me out a little bit. I'm not gonna say it ruined my enjoyment, but when you see Benedict Cumberbatch pop up just for a couple minutes, and he's he's the general. This is like his big casting. It's noticeable, you know.
Yeah. I
Um,
forgot that he was. I actually forgot that he was in it, but then when I saw him, I was like, oh, so there he is.
oh, so there he is. He popped up after all.
I was like, oh, Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, anything else you got to add for this movie?
I don't really think so.
No, you
I think we
you're
pretty
feeling
much
pretty
covered
good?
everything. Yeah.
Now, I do like Sam Mendes' work. He is the director of this movie. Sam Mendes did a lot of the 007. He did the more recent James Bond movies. I would say this is his strongest, absolutely his strongest work. And this movie was nominated for Best Picture. It did lose out that year, unfortunately, but it was nominated. It did win for cinematography and a couple other the effect categories. So, just keep that in mind. Like I said, it was something that was, critics, I think, did really take to. And honestly, I took to it a lot. So that being said, I'm going to give 1917 an A plus.
Oh my gosh.
I do think
Jeez.
I do think 1917. Again, it's not a perfect movie. Nothing's going to be perfect that you're going to review. I do think this is a cornerstone for cinematography. I think people should watch this movie. Take notes if you're making a movie. This is how to direct. Even if it's a different style, it's not the typical Hollywood style. Again, it's really powerful and more thought. The more times I've watched it, I think it's become even more thought provoking to me. I really enjoyed this story, and I think people need to take notice. John, what's your score? What are you going to give this?
I give it a C.
A C.
Based on, I just felt, I mean, like everything you've said about it with like the good things and the
Mm-hmm.
good cinematography and everything, I still just couldn't get behind the story. And I couldn't get behind just the fact of how boring it felt and how uninterested into the movie I was
Right.
for, I guess maybe, and it's my own fault for going into it thinking it was going to be a war based movie.
Right.
And it was more just like happened during a war
Right.
instead. So that's maybe why, but I still give it a C.
All right. Well, I
That
can.
one I would go see like out again,
Right.
you know.
Well, I can definitely respect your opinion. I respectfully disagree, but I do respect your opinion nonetheless. So, that being said, John, where can the people find us at home?
Well, you can find us on YouTube at The Real Movie Guys.
Right.
You can go like our channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can find out when we're reposting up more videos. You can also like us on Twitter at The Real Movie Guys. Follow us, chat with us, talk to us. And we're
Please.
also on many platforms for podcasting.
Indeed, for your listening pleasure, we are also available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Casts. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you're already right now, we greatly appreciate it. Just search Real Movie Guys, and we'll pop right up. Well, that's going to be all for today, guys. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. This guy over here, his name's John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We will catch you next time.
See ya!